Okay, welcome to more real estate invention, the good stuff, part 3C. And what are we going to deal with here? Well, let's start with what is HABU, highest and best use. It's a really important principle in real estate. Maybe it is the most fundamental and most important thing, whether you're investing in commercial real estate or residential real estate, or for that matter, any kind of real estate. You want to know what is legally allowable, physically possible, financially feasible, maximally or optimally productive. That is your highest and best use for property. And this is a well-respected maxim that applies not just to developers and investors, but also planners, generally speaking, around the world. Urban planners accept that highest and best use should be a guiding principle. I mean, think about it. It makes sense. We're dealing with a scarce resource called land. We might as well put it to its highest and best use. That will not only produce the best or most optimal returns for investors and developers, but usually it will produce the best benefits in terms of the community, users, visitors, tenants, and the city overall. And it will be more sustainable too because it's more intense and it's denser use of a scarce resource, land. So I actually wrote down here, highest and best use for a property is achieved when the value created by its development for a specific set of physically possible, that means buildable uses, permitted by the local government, municipal government, the functional program, and a particular form of structure combined to produce the highest present value of rents over the economic life of a project. And probably it should say highest present value of net rents. So rents less operating costs, insurance, property taxes, etc. There's a bit of a debate about that. But you might actually do the present value of net operating income to come up with an optimal solution. All right, so here's an example. This is my residence. It's in a modest part of Ottawa. It's a split level, and you've seen it before. It's at 1268 Henry Farm Drive in Ottawa. And I actually did this little drawing on my iPad, and it showed what the highest and best use is. And I'm not going to spend any time on this because yeah, you probably can't read my handwriting, so I did this for you. The highest and best use for 1268 Henry Farm Drive is it's a modest split level home, as I said, in an inner city location. It's got a main home with 3 bedrooms and 1 bath. It's got a 1 bedroom, side yard, tenanted legal apartment, so that's what exists now. It has a garage office, which is basically a 2 room, 1 bath workspace. It also has a bit of a micro kitchen in it. Now, quite accidentally, when we were renovating this property, we ended up with 3 suites in effect. The main home, the side yard apartment, and this garage office, which has its own ingress and egress, as you know, through the garage door, through the man door or person door that we put in place actually in the garage door. So if we ever move out of here, at least if we wanted to, we have 3 separate spaces to lease. We also have front yard parking, and in the back we have a mini farm where my bride grows corn, beans, potatoes, herbs, apples, pears, and various kinds of veggies. So we actually put it to a pretty intense use. What would I like to do with it? Well, if I can, if the law will permit me, I'll add a coach house, another storage shed. We have one. I'd like to add a second, a workshop, a backyard games area, and I really like the idea, as you know, of putting laneway and walkway awnings over all laneways and walkways. Why? Because I don't want to move snow anymore. We're also deploying various strategies in the home. Obviously, we're adding a tech package. We've already done that. We're doing some smart home stuff. We're doing a little bit more with energy production, rainwater recycling, solar hot water production. All right, so that's kind of where we're at. And if I could, I would add a tiny house, but that might be a bridge too far for our local government. Something else that we do that has been very popular with our tenants is we allow tenants to pay twice a month, right? So, you know, most people get paid every 2 weeks. And so if we're charging $1,230 as we do for our side yard apartment here at 1268 Henry Farm Drive, we'd let our tenant pay $615 twice a month if that helps their cash flow. Did I miss one? No. So animating an industrial park. So I've got a bit of a GIF going here, and it's pretty pathetic, but it's the best I can do. But I thought about industrial parks, and you know, think that that term itself is an oxymoron. An industrial park, think about that. Most industrial parks are just really kind of throwaway pieces of land. There are industrial parks around Ottawa in many parts of the United States, in the Midwest, certainly throughout Canada, that haven't seen a new building in 25 years. So I said, what would I do with it? And as you watch this GIF go round and round on your screen, I would add things like food services, restaurants with patios. I would add ancillary residential if I was allowed to, because lots of mom and pops like to live and work on the same property. I'd add professional offices. I'd allow on-street parking. I'd put in curbs and sidewalks. I'd add transit. I'd add public art. And so if you look at this, sort of infill, you've got this one a lonely industrial building on this animation, and then you add a store, and then you add some homes, and you add some offices, and you get something that might actually work. This is what I think we should do. We should go back into these industrial parks and make them work better by densifying them. All right, let's go on to the next slide. Here's an attempt to make a shopping plaza a little bit more, I don't know, friendly and usable, and I don't know, build a better community, but it's an actual fake. In other words, that entire second floor is not residential apartments. It's a fake, right? So this is not what you want to do, but the idea is right, that if you're going to build a shopping plaza, maybe you can add a second floor of offices. Or remember what we did with the or second floor of apartments, but you could also add second floor offices if you do what I did with the Royal Bank Pavilion, which is make the second floor offices like a ground floor retail space by giving them, the second floor that is, an actual at-grade entrance and sign. So really, this building is actually more like an old Western set that would kind of look like this. Is totally phony. Here's something that was really interesting, an experiment in New York City where they redeveloped an abandoned expressway into what's called Highline Park. And it has been a huge success. So today, Highline Park is where you can go and you can listen to music, you can hang out with your friends, you can read a book, you can get some sun, whatever it might be, you can play up there. And more than 4 million people were using the Highline Park, which you can see in this slide here, to walk and to think and to work and to play in 2012. And so anybody who has access to this old expressway now, as this building does here, these condos are incredibly in demand, almost as much as overlooking Central Park, which is a fantastic view in New York City. So it has been a great success. Over $2 billion has been spent so far, and this was, I think, in 2015, so probably quite a bit more today, connecting to the Highline Park. So I proposed for Canada 150, which was 2017, that the national government and the government of Quebec and Ontario, as well as the cities of Ottawa and Gatineau, create the longest boardwalk in the world, over 10,000 meters, so over 10 kilometers. And you can sort of see from the War Museum here, watch my cursor, all the brown lines connecting to the parliamentary precinct, going all the way down to the University of Ottawa, going into the Byward Market, then going east towards the Rockcliffe Pavilion, all along the beautiful Ottawa River. So you're connecting the Ottawa River with, I guess, the canal, Rideau Canal, which is a National World Heritage Site, and then going over one of the railroad bridges into Quebec, connecting with the Museum of Civilization, now called the Museum of History, all the way to the marina, and then sneaking up here to the Casino de Lac Limy and the lake itself. That would be about 10 kilometers. And even where it goes into the city itself, like when it comes down to connect to the University of Ottawa here, and maybe at some stage connecting to Carleton University, the boardwalk, even in an urban area, you would look down and you would see on the sidewalk, a certain color, like the yellow brick road, a certain color of boards, and you know that once your feet are on, yellowed boards or whatever color you choose, you know that you can keep following this and it'll take you 10 kilometers. So that's what I wanted to do. Nobody else thought it was a good idea, but I did. And I think that would be Ottawa's answer to the Highline Park. So there you go. Wherever these boardwalks have been built, here's one in Atlantic City. Pretty much the only thing that works in Atlantic City is, in fact, the boardwalk, and the only real estate there that has any value is connected to the boardwalk. So these boardwalks do work as economic engines. And the largest, longest boardwalk in the world is Atlantic City, at least as far as I could find out in my research, at around 4.5 miles. So 10 kilometers would be about 6.2 miles, be a little longer than Atlantic City. And it would go along with, this is Ottawa Skateway, the Rideau Canal, which is the longest skateway in the world. I can't remember if it's 10 kilometers, but it's quite a long skateway. All right, shifting gears a little bit, I want to talk about rural development. And this is a form of development called conservation subdivision design that's become very popular in the United States, less so in Canada, and I'll talk about that in a second. So what is conservation subdivision design? So let's say you're a developer along Route 7, and you have, I don't know, 100 acres here that you want to develop. Well, typically in Canada, what you would do is you would put in a row, follow my cursor here, that would sort of loop around like that, and you'd have, if it's 100 acres, you'd probably have 35 or 40 2-acre lots on this property. There wouldn't be any public lands, there wouldn't be any community property, it would just all be 35 or 40 2-acre lots and some roadway and maybe a small pocket park somewhere. Conservation subdivision design works quite differently. What you do is you cluster the homes. As you can see them here, they're clustered here on this loop here, clustered here on this loop here, and then this loop. And all the rest of the property is left in its natural state. Now, initially, a lot of developers thought if you do that, you would end up, obviously not having as many homes, and people would have smaller lots and they wouldn't pay as much. In fact, the opposite happened. The sell-through was faster in conservation subdivision design, and frankly, once you get much beyond half an acre of property, once you get to 1 acre, 2 acres, or 5 acres, it's more property than most people want to develop or use and maintain, frankly. So maintaining it in community hands in its original state or close to original state, and then what happens is you connect it to other properties, to, in this case, to the right here, to the left, maybe to the north as you go up the page here. And it allows wildlife to migrate through the community as well. So you're not impinging as much on the natural environment. What makes conservation subdivision design work is the small bore sewer systems. In other words, these individual lots do not have individual wells and individual septics. And you have community services, which means that not everybody has to be a water engineer and a sanitary engineer. You have a collective system, as I said, small bore sewer system and water system that supplies potable water to everybody and also takes away the wastes. The reason I like the small bore sewer system is that if it's a sealed system, you can use a siphon system. So as long as where you're treating the waste is lower than every other part of the property, you can, your small bore sewer systems can go up and down, so you don't have to level the property either. Why don't places in Canada permit this kind of development? Well, the Minister of Environment in Ontario is afraid that if the small bore sewer system or the water system ever failed, they'll end up owning the problem. And so that's why they don't do it. But that is a huge mistake. We've had at least 50 years of experience with condominium corporations, and generally they don't go bankrupt. They are required to have reserves. So you could have these micro utilities, I'm sure, operate. But that's a bridge too far for our government. Nevertheless, this is the kind of subdivision that I would never build anything in the rural area other than this. As everybody knows who's been watching this series, I love media towers. This was a media tower actually designed by a former student of mine, a young architect then. He's now in his 40s, Brian Samure. And it's literally a media tower. So this was, I think, a swimming pool, Olympic caliber pool, and then it had some other kind of retail uses here or community uses here. And believe it or not, we called this the Mile High Tower because there was a ramp which was wheelchair accessible that wound its way all the way up to a two-story restaurant and bar at the top. and it had all this, these media walls on the outside, and it was actually a mile to get up to the top of the tower. So you could use it for races, and you could use it for just people meandering up and down. And at the top, there was this tethered gas balloon. And I'll show you what that is. So these are the media towers that you see. I guess this is Ginza Strip in Tokyo, and they tend to animate a city and a place, and certainly generate a lot of revenue for these building owners. I've always liked the tethered gas balloon. This is exactly what it sounds like. It's a hydrogen, or I guess helium-filled balloon hydrogen. You do a Hindenburg. So helium-filled balloons, and they are tethered. So there's a cable here, and they go up in about 5 minutes to 500 feet, and then you pull them down. And you can take them up in wind conditions, probably up to about 10 or 12 knots, maybe as much as 15-knot winds, and pull them down safely. So they're really, in essence, the poor man's CN tower. And so what Brian and I had in mind was maybe at Canadian Tire Center building something like this, which would be a lot of fun. And it would be a big income generator for the Ottawa Senators. I just pulled this off the internet. Somebody who's obviously built an incredible structure, or a couple of structures, literally in the middle of nowhere. It's full of surprise and delight. Imagine if you put that on Airbnb or Flipkey, what you could get in terms of, daily or weekly rentals for something like this. So people these days are doing fantastic projects that, you don't have to think about real estate as being just, your conventional, I bought a duplex kind of thing. Here's something else that I learned fairly early on in my career, that if you don't reserve parking spaces, and of course, if we go to automated cars, nobody will have reserved parking spaces. But back in the day when tenants would come to me and say, look, Bruce, can I have 10 designated parking spaces? I would say no. Because in actual fact, if you don't designate any particular parking space as being, Bob or Mary's or Ahmed's, if you don't do that, you actually increase your revenues and your spaces by about 25%, because about 25% of over a year of people are on holidays, or they're out visiting, or they're having sick days, or they're working from their home environment. So you can actually create extra space without actually adding any more parking. The other thing that's going on is the same sort of thing with hoteling office workers. If you don't have designated workstations, you could probably get away with as much as a 50% decrease in space requirements. And so again, you want to be a bit more efficient and intense in the use of space, which is very expensive these days. Something else that I did, that it's kind of an invention, I suppose, is that we often will negotiate an agreement of purchase and sale that even during the conditional period, or at least once the deal has been firmed up but not yet closed, is that we can remarket. So if you're buying an office building or shopping plaza that has some vacancies, once you've waived your conditions, you want to start marketing that right away, even before closing, if the seller agrees. And here's an example of that. This is a project that we're working on in 2017, and 18, and 19. A client of mine is building in the east end of Orleans, or east end of Ottawa in Orleans, a new subdivision. Here it is, that you can see here as my cursor goes around it. It's on Mare Bleu Road, in a fast-growing part of Ottawa in the east end, and it's called Fortitude. It's a concept plan. And what they're doing is they're building a big new facility for Tumblers Gymnastics, one of the top 5 gymnastics clubs in Ontario. And that'll be about a 70,000 square foot building. But the neat thing about it is they bought more land, about 14 acres of land. It looks kind of like a Star Wars destroyer. They bought this destroyer about 14 acres, but they only needed about 5.5 acres for tumblers. So in addition to that, they'll have a retail plaza here, a health and wellness center here, a retirement residence here. I think this is going to be an 8 to 10 story residence. So people who are training here will have a place to live. And this is a large large sports dome. So a lot more going on here than you might think. And the idea is that you buy land, at a certain price per acre, and you add roads and sewers and water mains and services, and then you resell parcels for more than you paid, maintaining or retaining, the building that you want, in this case, the Tumblers building. So this is all a profit center, and that's what we did with Canadian Tire Center. We bought 600 acres of land, and the idea was to hold on to 100 acres, put an NHL team, the Ottawa Senators and the Palladium, in the middle of it, drive up the value, and sell off the extra 500 acres. So that's kind of what we did, and this is certainly the plan out here. So that is the idea. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that even in the conditional period, we had permission from the seller, which was Minto, to remarket the property, and we in fact sold one piece here during that conditional period. This is another project a client of mine is working on, which I just absolutely adore. This is I guess a three-story building. I guess, yeah, 1, 2, 3-story building with a basement, and this is building will have 15 micro suites. So it has what I call a manufactured walkout condition. So even the lower level here, you can see the basements here, will have their own access and egress to the outside. They have large, windows because this is just sort of a dugout condition. They'll even have some outdoor entertainment areas here. So what we're trying to do with this project is give every single suite, micro suite, and there's 15 of them, as I said, access to the outside, access and ingress from the outside, and some private outdoor space that each of them will be able to use. And what's kind of cool about it is the penthouse units here actually have a loft here, and they have rooftop decks as well. So it's a pretty neat design, and I think it will be a very successful product for a client of mine. Now, what is the functional program of this? I mean, he could put these micro suites, which range in size from 200 to about 350 square feet. They could be sort of an 8 or 9 month student lease and then 3 or 4 months on Airbnb, or they could be year-round micro suite rentals. And I'm leaning towards the latter simply because young professionals these days, they don't really want roommates. If you have a roommate, you're going to end up in an argument within a few months. Who ate my leftover pizza? Where's my beer? It's your turn to clean the bathroom. No, it's your turn to clean the bathroom. And basically, if you have your micro suite, it's you. It's your. If there's two of you, there's partners. You know whose turn it is to clean the bathroom and who's eating the leftover pizza, right? And there's a lot less work. A young professional who rents a micro suite is probably going to be there for anywhere from 1 to 3 years. So you're not having the constant churn of students or Airbnb rentals. A lot less work for you, I think, as landlord. The other thing I'm trying to do with residential leasing is I'm trying to make them more like commercial leasing. In commercial leasing, generally, whether it's retail or office space, you're looking at triple net rents. So the tenant is paying a basic minimum rent, and on top of that, he or she, they are paying for operating costs, insurance, property taxes, utilities, administration, management, all of that on top. So that's what a triple net lease is. And we're trying to do more of that with our residential leases. And yes, there is some pushback there, but we want more clawbacks in our residential leases for property management and administration, utilities, the tech package, obviously, insurance, snow removal, landscaping, and garbage. I always ask not how much things cost, but how much you can make with it. And this is something that I stress over and over again, that what you want to do in, not just in real estate, but in any business, is try and turn cost centers into profit centers. And if you're saying, gee, I can't afford that, your language, it's the rich dad, poor dad language. The rich dad doesn't say, how much does it cost? He or she says, I guess dad, so he says, how much can I make with it? So if you could buy a property for $900,000 that had a cap rate of 9%, or you could buy a property for $600,000 with a 6% cap rate, probably the $900,000 property is better. But most people say, well, I can't afford that. That is, in fact, looking through the wrong end of the telescope, in my opinion. You can almost always find investors who are willing to invest in good projects with a 9% cap rate. Here's one I did a long time ago called Blue Heron Storage. It's in Canada North. Again, what I did was I built this high ranch bungalow. It's got an apartment here, an apartment downstairs, and in behind it built 4 storage buildings, so mini storage. So it's an industrial property, but it had accessory residential, and everyone knows I like that. And people said, well, gee, Bruce, if you're running a mini storage business, how much are you going to pay your manager to run that mini storage business? And I said, nothing. And people said, well, no, it's going to cost you 45 or 50, $55,000 a year to pay that person. I said, no, I don't think so. It's not how much it costs, right? So what I did was I advertised for a retired couple, and Lynn Larange, shown here, and her husband Bert Larange, lovely people, came along, and I said, Lynn and Bert, how about you live upstairs rent free, but you manage Blue Heron Storage for me for free, or we trade checks, whatever is best for you, right? And that's what they agreed to do, because frankly, running a mini storage business isn't that complicated. You know, somebody shows up with a pickup truck and a trailer, and you look at your list and you say, yeah, I've got unit B5 is vacant. They go down there, they throw their stuff in there, they close it, they put their own lock in, they come and they sign a 4-page lease, a simple lease, they give you a credit card to buy. You see them twice a year, once in the spring, once in the fall. So Lynn and Bert probably were working 10 or 12 hours a month managing the business, and they got free rent. For retired persons on a fixed income, free rent sounds pretty good. So the cost to run that business for me was zero. Here's another business I really like, and I just wanted to introduce people who are listening to this series to some neat ideas, that so that, you know, there's more to real estate than just, you know, I bought a triplex. This is a project in, I guess, Scottsdale. Yeah, Scottsdale, Arizona. Yeah, actually in Gilbert, so close to Phoenix and Scottsdale, and it's mini contractor yards for rent. And you can see it right here. So it's a very, very simple idea. He's got looks like a racetrack here, and he's divided up his property. Kyle's divided up his property into sort of mini contractor yards that are fenced. They do have power, and you can rent them for about $500 a month. It's been a huge success. And it's not, again, it's like the mini storage business is not particularly complicated to run. So I like that. And what would I do? If I owned that, I might add a flea market. I'd probably be storing vehicles. I might be storing tires. I might add a food truck. I really like this one here. I like workshops, and I found that there's a big demand for small workshops. We rented a workshop not long ago to a lady, an artist, who makes furniture out of wood pallets, and everybody will supply her with free stuff, because lots of places have wood pallets coming out of their ears. They'll deliver them for free, and she makes furniture out of them, and she needed a micro workshop. Micro retail, you saw that in the garage where a guy had a pool store and a micro retail, so I like that. Micro offices, obviously, I like my garage office. I always would add ancillary residential if the local municipality would let me, and I'd probably add some RVs and tiny houses again if the municipality would let me. So I think you can bring creativity and flair to your real estate concepts. There you go. Time for another break.